Okay, so before we start, I'm just going to give a brief introduction to our project. So this webinar is part of a nationwide project on national unity and interracial harmony. So this project is funded by the EU and it's entering its first year. It's part of a 2-year project, and it seeks to engage academicians, policymakers, government officials, but as well as the public's opinion to engage to like exchange between various stakeholders about the multi-layered issue of racism in Malaysia. So in this particular webinar, we will speak to 4 Malaysians who have worked to bridge gaps, and we'll talk about race relations and bridging the gap between ethnicities through their own stories, how we use new media and the arts. And our fellow Malaysians will also share their success stories, their not so successful stories, and how their work has impacted conversations on race and identity in Malaysia. This is going to be a very difficult conversation, but I'm sure that we will have a fruitful one. So before we start, hold on, yeah. Yep, so before we start, we will have Ian Yee first, and then we'll have Nitusha, and then we'll have Ame afterwards, before we move on to the Q&A session. So for our fellow viewers, you can put in your questions in the Q&A box if you have anything, and you can also put in anything that you wish to comment in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about Ian. Ian is an investigative journalist, and he is the co-founder of The Fourth. He is also an award-winning investigative journalist and impact producer. So Ian and his team combine hard-hitting investigative journalism with impact-driven media campaigns to help tackle social justice issues ranging from human trafficking to indigenous rights. Ian is also an Obama Foundation leader, Acumen Fellow, Gen T honoree, Human Rights Measurement Initiative ambassador, and UNICEF National Consultant. So it is a mouthful, but I know that we're gonna have like a good conversation with Ian today. So Ian, you may take the floor.
Thank you so much, Iman. And I know all of you have heard this a million times before, but I'm gonna share my screen now and hope it works. In the time of Zoom. Do you guys see that? Do you guys see? Cool, 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 cool. I see some thumbs up. And just to make sure everyone's here and everyone's comfortable to interact, can you guys just, if you're here with me and you're excited today for this conversation, can you just type a 1 into the chat box? Just a simple 1 so I can see you guys. Awesome. Okay, I see it lighting up. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready to comment at any time during my session. I don't know about the rest, but I'm really happy to see. I'll be able to check in on your chat comments later on. So feel free if you want to add anything to what I'm saying, or if you want to completely disagree with what I'm saying. I'd be more than happy to see what you guys have to comment on that later on. Anyway, so I'm actually the co-founder of The Fourth. It's just a not-for-profit collective of journalists who hope to use investigative and impact journalism to defend democracy and social justice. Very, very lofty ambitions, yes, I know. But of course, I think more of you will be more familiar with the work that I've done for RAGE. It's an investigative unit that was under the Star Media. So I just want to start off with a really simple question today. What's your identity? All right. First thing that comes to mind, I want you guys to do this right now. First thing that comes to mind, you type it into the chat. What's your identity? It's a very existential question to be asking at 10 a.m. in the morning, I know. Come on, what's your identity? I'm going to open the chat and see if anybody's answering. I am me. Oh my God. You've reached my conclusion, so I think I can just stop my presentation right now. Malaysian, thank you so much. Kok Lili, Malaysian. Okay, I see a lot of Malaysian. Anybody else? This should be a fairly straightforward answer, right? Queer, white, she, her. Thank you so much, Lydia. Anything else? What's your identity? Do we really struggle that much with it? Imat Alata. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Identity is about purpose on this earth. Correct. Very, very good. Very interesting. Anybody else? What's your identity? How about the other panelists? What's your identity? No straightforward answers, right?
Malaysian Indian.
Malaysian
woman,
Indian. Thank you so much. Woman.
Southeast Asian.
Southeast Asian. Very good. Thank you so much for that. I'm guessing
Yeah.
that was Natusha. I can't really see your faces, but I can hear your voices. Okay. So then let's turn this on me then. What do you think is my identity? What do you think is my identity? So you've heard Iman give like a bit of an introduction to who I am. What do you think is my identity? Just looking at me right now. Can you put that in the chat? And don't worry, you really can't offend me at all. It's like I asked for it. Educator, thank you very much. Wow. Okay. Journalist, thank you, Moen. Anybody else? Anybody want to hazard a guess? What's my identity? Someone in investigative journalism. Very good. Thank you. So yeah, an investigative journalist in short, correct? Democrat. Wow. As in the Democratic Party or a Democratic person in general? Just kidding. And this says you're a guy. Okay, very cool. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for those answers. Human of the world. Yes, I do consider myself a human. Malaysian Chinese changemaker. Wow, that's a big title. Thank you very much. I'm not sure I deserve it. But yes, so I think as you can see, identity is something that's very complex, right? It's something that we grapple with. Even if I ask you for a simple answer off the top of your head, there's so much complexity there that you don't really even dare to hazard a guess. Star Wars fan. Is it because of the fourth? Because that's not what it really is, but close enough. But I am, yes, I am a Star Wars fan. So identity is very complex, right? There's always a lot of different layers to identity. So for example, for me, I had to do this exercise once as well as part of the Acumen Fellowship, where we started to think, what is our identity? There's so many different facets to it, right? I am a journalist. Is that what defines me? Maybe not. I'm a husband. I'm heterosexual. I am Malaysian. I am Chinese. There's so many facets to my identity, and it is unique to me, right? So identity, I think every person has a unique identity that is a mixture of all these different facets, some more prominent sometimes and some less prominent sometimes. And that's why identity is also something that's very dynamic. And I read somewhere that usually the facet of identity that comes to the fore is when it feels is the one that is actually being threatened. That what brings that identity to the forefront. So for example, recently we've seen a lot of talk about teachers, right? And what happens when these stories go viral, you know, with period checks and all that, and rape jokes and all that. What identity started to come forward when that story came out? Can anybody try to answer in the chat? For example, with the period checks one, which identity do you feel came out much more? Army, you're correct. Yeah, young female student. Yes, women, right? Girls, women. They came to the forefront. That identity came forward. A lot of women started to come forward and rightfully called out this behavior because that sense, that identity of being a girl, of being a woman felt threatened, right? So for right or wrong reasons, that identity is dynamic in that sense, right? When something, so for example, if we're talking about LGBT issues, then my identity as a heterosexual comes to the forefront, right? And I identify as that and I speak from that perspective, okay? Similarly, I saw a lot of one identity that came to the forefront was of teachers, right? When they started talking about these issues, you see a lot of teachers coming forward, some probably not very kindly tried to defend what was going on, but that's how identity works. When any facet of it is threatened, that tends to come to the forefront. And the problem with that now is when we're talking about identity in media, especially in what we mean, we call it new media, but obviously this is what someone old like me would say new media, right? But actually it's present media. Media today is actually very tribal in nature. If you're talking about social media platforms, if you're talking about messaging groups and online, these kind of communities that you build online, it's very tribal in nature, right? It tends to pull and keep identity to itself. Like, this is our identity, we stay put, we protect it as a group. And also new media tends to kind of highlight a lot of emotions, right? People who speak, demagogues exist on, are the ones that become the most influential on social media. Nobody wants a professor to come on board and give cold hard facts in the video. Oh, this person is an influencer, I'm going to follow this person. Well, click, 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 like. That just doesn't lend itself to the new digital media that we are also involved in. That is such an important part of our lives now. And thirdly, new media tends to lend itself to more shallow consumption of information. So the consumption patterns you see in media today, as somebody who's been a journalist for about 15 years now, back in the day, you write long stories, your readership isn't going to read it. It's physical form, they bought the paper, they've invested in it, they're going to take their time reading it. They'll go through the story from front to back, chances are. If the headline hooks them in, they will. These days, people just scroll through. I see the headlines, I have a much broader base of knowledge, but it doesn't tend to be as deep, as in-depth as it used to be. So that's a bit of a problem when you're discussing identity, right? Because what you're going to end up is with stuff like this, right? What we found, and what I find the most disturbing in this era of media is all this, like, I'm sure you've seen these headlines before. Democrat talking point destroys conservative Republican. Or so if you look at the top left, you already see identities at play, right? Because even the way you do a YouTube thumbnail, oh, sorry, somebody's telling me that the slide isn't changing. Have my slides been like on slide 1 the whole time?
Yes. I thought it was deliberate.
Nope. Okay, let me try this again. Oh my goodness, so sorry, so sorry. I tested it out earlier and it worked. Okay, let me try this again. Do you guys see different slides now?
Yes.
Oh goodness. Okay, let's try. I'm just gonna show you the slides so you guys get. So I actually had it all on. Do you guys see this? Identity is complex, unique, dynamic.
No, Ian, we're not seeing it.
Now
Oh,
it's a gray block.
Oh goodness.
Okay, Ian, I'll try to share it.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry everyone, I tested it out earlier and it worked. And now it's not working. And I don't know why.
The vagaries of online forums.
Yeah, right. Just as we were talking about like the pros and
everyone
cons
see
of
this?
new media.
Can
I see
everyone
it.
see this? Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So can you go to the next slide, please? So this is where I asked what's your identity earlier. Next slide. So this is where I was talking about, the nature of identity. It's complex. We have multifaceted identities, all of us. Some would even say it's different identities at play. It's also unique to whoever you are. And it's dynamic in the sense that it's always shifting, which is at the forefront. Right? Next slide, please. This is kind of some of the attributes of new digital media that we have today. Yeah, it lends itself to the building of tribes. It lends itself to expressions of emotion, and that's where demagogues often become influential and get a lot of followers. And also, obviously, it lends itself to more shallow consumption of media versus more in-depth consumption that we had in the past. Okay, next slide, please. And now this is what I was trying to show you guys. So for example, even the slide on the top left, right? Even right there in that little thumbnail, and this is what the media has to do all the time, right? You are actually fighting for people's attention. You need to have a very nice thumbnail. In fact, YouTube, when you go for their training on how to be a content creator, they spend a lot of time talking about how you should make really, really nice thumbnails that grab attention. So that thumbnail right there, clearly they're going for some identity, like some you know, conflict between identities there, right? Obviously one of them is what's her name? Trump's last press secretary out of his like 15. And you see already some identities at play there. One is probably conservative, one is probably progressive, and so on and so forth. And even, for example, this is the one on the top right is a sports media channel. I don't know about it, but clearly they also want to have that identity conflict at play there, right? They want to show feminist, that's an identity, right? That's something a lot of people identify with, and they want to create that sense of conflict in order to get more views and more clicks, because that's the way new media works. And then obviously at the bottom right, you have Piers Morgan fighting against everybody in the world. Every single identity is not his, he will find issue with, right? So that is a problem that we have with the media today. Can we go to the next slide, please? And it's led to this issue, right? We always hear of politicians getting schooled, politicians destroyed. Not just politicians, not just that identity. You'll have trans right activists schooled by, you know, conservative talking points. You'll have a lot of this type of conversation going on. And I'm sure you've seen, especially in news panel shows, where there's a lot of screaming matches and arguing. And that's where we, together with Ideas, we were hoping to do something a bit different. Next slide, please. Our solution to all this, the problems that are brought about with new media and the culture that has come out from it, is really simple: empathetic conversations. What we're trying to call empathetic conversations. Especially in our news media, you see too many shouting matches, too many screaming matches between commentators, like the one you saw with the CNN clip right there. There would definitely be a lot of ugliness. They're always pitting two different identities against each other. So what I wanted to do was just kind of, instead of always have these debates where people are trying to beat each other, that we have conversations. And I think the next one's going to be a video. Let's hope this plays. Oh no. Okay, let me try to show you the video then. I'm so sorry for all the technical difficulties, but let's hope this works. Do you guys see a video file playing?
Yes, Ian, we do.
Awesome. Yep. Oh, it's gonna work. I just did the exact same thing and it worked this time. All right.
Ian, the video isn't playing.
Are you kidding me? Okay.
We can hear the audio, but there is, yeah.
Oh goodness. I'm so sorry, everyone.
It's okay. It's okay. Just a little technical glitch.
Yeah,
I'm sure everyone is okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the link to the video after this, because this is. Do you guys see the screen now? Do you guys see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah, but it's like on one. What do you call it?
Okay, I'm gonna give this one last try. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So sorry, everybody. And then I'm just gonna move on and try to make the best of it. Do you guys see my desk? Do you guys see it now?
Yes, we can see your desktop.
Okay. Let's hope this actually works. And you still see it?
Okay, we can see Sama-Sama project.
Okay, let's try this one last time. I promise I'll give up and just move off.
My general fear, language requirement then is used to masquerade racist tendencies.
I totally disagree with that, because language has nothing to do with race.
I don't think race and language should be a main criteria towards any job applications, or even if you want to seek for a tenancy untuk rumah sewa, I don't think that should be a main criteria for you to look for a candidate. Mendengar secara berempati, berkongsi dengan ikhlas, menerima pendapat orang lain dengan terbuka.
So, A very, very simple concept. I hope you guys saw that. Everyone good? There were no complaints, so I'll take that as an okay. Okay. So sama-sama project, and why do we call it sama-sama? Because I think that's a uniquely Malaysian term that has wonderful meaning. Number one, it shows that we're the same. So kita sama-sama. The other meaning is that we are together. Kita sama-sama pergi sana, sama-sama buat ini, buat tu. So togetherness. And finally, it also shows civility. Right? You say terima kasih, you say sama-sama. So those are three very, very important elements in any conversation, we believe, and in any discussion about trying to find a common ground or shared values. And so far, we've done 3 episodes. We've done 3 of these sessions. So just 3 simple rules on empathetic conversation. And the results have been really, really great. Everybody who's participants were like, at the end of it, they were like, it's like group hug moments. Everybody's like, we need to do this more. We need to have this televised on RTM. That's something that's been said quite a few times. So I'm just going to show you a short snippet of an upcoming episode. And just to give you an idea of how the conversations actually play out.
Identiti kita sebagai orang Malaysia sedang diancam oleh nilai-nilai liberal.
Oh, sorry. Quick. But so the game is, if you agree with the statement, you drink. If you disagree, you don't drink. So it's like, we call it the world's most meaningful drinking game.
I do feel that liberal values do sort of mengkikis a bit the social fabric of our country as a whole. Kadang orang yang liberal ini, mereka kurang ataupun mereka terlalu cepat mengkritik orang yang berpendapat tradisional. Seolah-olah pandangan tradisional atau konservatif itu salah ataupun outdated ataupun this person cannot be reasoned with.
Kalau seorang yang berpendapat konservatif, dia terfikir tentang nilai-nilai liberal, apa yang dia orang fikir, kan? The extreme one would be seks bebas, dadah, semua ni. Tapi sekarang nilai-nilai liberal yang lebih control, more like talk about sex education, policy making, more liberal form of policy making. So this nilai-nilai liberal yang menggalakkan perbincangan. Kalau untuk konservatif pula, sebab ada fahaman tradisional yang inilah cara kita buat, dah berzaman-zaman dah kita buat ni. Kita ikut je. I rasa kalau ada yang perlu diperbaiki, kita perlu perbaiki. So tak semestinya mengancam, tapi mengubah.
So that's just a quick snippet. If you look through the whole thing, it's very, very meaningful. It's actually very powerful. It's just based on 3 rules that we give them in terms of how to converse with one another. Okay. So it's all about finding shared identities through empathy. Sitting people down together to sort through these very, very difficult and complex identities that all of them are holding, and not just saying that, okay, you are this one identity, you are that identity, you are conservative, you are liberal, you guys sit, and this is what all you ever be. So the start of every episode is actually not about their identity. We don't say this is liberal versus conservative. We actually put out an issue. For example, that episode is about whether traditional values are being being threatened by liberal values or something along those lines. And then they're discussing that issue, and we're not putting any labels on any of them in terms of their identity. And then from there, as they discuss the issue, as we go through a lot of different statements, they start to find that they actually have a lot of shared identities. So not only I'm not just somebody who identifies as liberal, I'm actually, for example, they eventually realize, oh, actually, we also share an identity, even though you're conservative and I'm liberal, but we are also family people, for example. We also have children. And that's something that they start to identify with, and they be able to find some shared value and common ground there. Okay. I think I'm gonna stop there. There's just one last video that I'm just gonna put the link into the chat after this. So in terms of the work that we do, that I've been doing as a storyteller, and in terms of being a writer and a documentary producer, very often we find that if you portray people in a very one-dimensional manner, which is what a lot of media unfortunately has to do in this day and age, because of the way digital media is, you'll find that you're just putting out caricatures there all the time, and that lends itself to conflict. You're just saying this is a Republican, this is a Democrat, like what you see in the U.S. Here, this person is left wing, right wing, and so on and so forth. And you're always pitting extremes at each other. But what we did with this next video that I want you guys to hopefully go and see later is we were speaking to this is a series we did on migrant workers in Malaysia. And as you watch this video, I want you guys to see what kind of identities you see in this person, in Somraj. And you'll see that it's so multifaceted again. And when we start to tell stories that way, when we start to look at our profiles, we start to look at people beyond the labels and the identities that are immediately apparent, that's when we become more effective storytellers. We add more color to our stories, but more importantly, we also celebrate the diversity and identities that we have, and find more touch points in terms of common identity, shared identity, and shared values. Yeah. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for being patient throughout all the technical difficulties, and I'll share the slides with everyone and all the YouTube links as well. Thanks. Back to you, Iman.
Thank you so much, Ian. And no worries, I feel like post MCO and during this COVID season, it's so normal to have technical difficulties, and because we all live in like a virtual world right now, right? But yeah, thank you so much. I feel like that was such a great presentation from you, talking about identity and new media and how like controversy and a lot of stereotypes are used as a tool to talk about race relations. And I feel like that creates even more divisiveness, in our community, and how we can empower empathetic conversations in our community to like talk about it better and have more meaningful conversations, like this one, right? And people need to start having these kind of conversations more. But yeah, before we move on, I'll just like to inform everyone that Nelson is joining, but he is having some internet issues, technical difficulties as well. So hopefully he will be able to join us in a bit. I'm so sorry, that was my cat in the background. But yeah, so let's move on to Natusha. Natusha, let me just read out your bio. Okay, so Natusha is the president and co-founder of Imagine Malaysia. Imagine Malaysia is a non-profit organization that is dedicated to promoting historical literacy and which engages in the issues of the day from a historically informed perspective. So that is really interesting. Maybe you can talk about Imagine Malaysia more. But Natusha was awarded the Tunku Abdul Rahman Fund in St. Catherine's College to pursue a master's in philosophy in world history at the University of Cambridge. She recently also completed a dissertation titled In Search of Patani Raya, Malay Anti-Colonial Imaginaries at the Fringes of Empire from 1945 to 1948. That seems like a very tough dissertation title. But through research on the anti-colonial right to self-determination in the borderlands of Southeast Asia, Natusha is also determined to work towards fostering transnational solidarities for an international order, which is characterized by decolonization and non-domination. So Natusha is also a new generation board member of Forces of Renewal in Southeast Asia, or also known as FORCE. So Natusha, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. There'll be times where I'll be lagging because, internet problems, Malaysia boleh, that kind of thing. But so Helmi will be sharing my slides in PDF form. So once we get that, yeah. I think you just like share it like full screen, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I mean, that'll do. That's fine too. No problem. Okay, yeah, so we could go back to the first slide. Yeah, okay, I'll let you know when to move on to the next one. Thanks. Okay, so where do I start? Right, Imagine Malaysia. So Imagine Malaysia is currently working through a project in collaboration with Ideas along the same lines, and in Imagine Malaysia, we grapple a lot with identity because one of the reasons I thought of this idea to form a non-profit organization dedicated to historical thinking was because as a secondary school student reading the Form 5 textbook, preparing for SPM Sejarah, I just thought to myself, how can the textbook so blatantly associate one particular ethnic identity to one political ideology in a very extreme way and constantly reproduce that perspective? And it was confusing as a young Malaysian to think, do people think this way about each other? If the history textbook continues to label people in such rigid ways, then how does it influence our vision of identity? So, and of course, race, as Ian, briefly mentioned as well, race is a big part of Malaysian identity, and it has become a major preoccupation in our minds, whether it's politics or just like even like basic other issues that maybe has nothing to do so much with race, but other things. The period checks as well has become an issue that has been racialized to a certain extent. So is there a way to envision Malaysia in a post-racial setting? This is the question that a lot of us grapple with. Can we see each other more than just our racial identities? But in order to do that, that is why there is the place of anti-racist history in public discourses. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about our work previously, what we have done, and then how this vision of anti-racist history becomes really relevant. We have plenty of identities. Next slide, please. Okay. So here's the thing about Imagine Malaysia. We are here trying to envision projects, particularly research projects, that are not only to be a platform for independent historical research, but to make historical research accessible and as a tool for collaborative approach. So one of the things that we've been venturing out to do is to be a space for independent research. There are very few opportunities for students of the humanities. If you studied history, sociology, maybe even English literature, and you like to pursue a career in historical research, it's very difficult unless you get into academia, do a master's or a PhD, right? Or attach yourself to an institution. And how many institutions or think tanks have a historically based trajectory in their research? Very few. So one of the things Imagine Malaysia wants to do is provide that opportunity for historical research outside academia. Then we want to produce accessible, collated, and targeted body of work for advocacy that is rooted in historical thinking. Because if we don't reflect on the past, how are we going to make sense of the present and reimagine our future? And through historical research, we want to encourage productive, reflexive, and nuanced dialogue on issues of public interest. And this could be whether it's democracy, how democracies are shaped and kept in check. It could be our economy or things like that. And of course, finally, we want to create an environment of collaboration. So we want to contribute and advocate for this kind of approaches to empower different communities, whether they are marginalized or not. Next slide. Okay, so on this issue of identity, so someone in the chat mentioned being an educator. And for many of us, young people, being a student is a big part of your identity, right? At least at one point in your life, being a student is a big part of your life. And of course, once upon a time, students have played a very important role in the checking of democracy. So last year, from August to December, Imagine Malaysia embarked on this project called A History of Student Activism in Malaysia. It was led by my Vice President, Khalida Talib, and our amazing team of researchers. Project lead was quite a well-known student activist as well, Zikri Rahman, and a group of young researchers. And the purpose of this database was to produce a research paper and to think about how student activism is a big part of the nation building process. And student activism, if you go check out our paper, is comprising of multiple identities that just converge into being a student. And of course, most importantly, students who care about the political health and well-being and social well-being in Malaysia. So this was a very comprehensive study, pretty intense. I was not involved in it at all, but I'm here to promote it because the website was just launched and I think everyone should check it out. You can find the research paper. There'll be some data analysis. There was a lot of original research went into this. There was focus group discussions with students, former student activists, interviews with famous student activists, survey across universities, and as well as roundtable discussions. So out of this, the research paper came out and a microsite, which next slide. Okay, yeah, so maybe can you scroll down a bit so that can you see the link down there? Because I can't see. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, so that's the link to the microsite, studentactivism.imagine.my, and you can check it out and see all the data that was collected. And yeah, and the group is still open to collaborations. We hope to extend this work. It does not end with this microsite because student activism is constantly evolving. It's not something in the past for Malaysia. So if you're interested, please contact me or my team. If you go to the website, you can see the project coordinator's email there, and you can reach out to them and talk about this. But yes, please consider looking at this, and it really just shows the complexity of identity and things go beyond race. And one of the interesting findings actually from this paper was that student activism comprises of a lot of trans-ethnic solidarity as well. So there is possibilities in certain moments or turning points in political history that allow us to think of ourselves beyond, colonial bond categories, as you could say. Next slide. Okay, so this idea for anti-racist history.
You have frozen, I think. I can't hear anything.
Natasha, your video is frozen. Okay, we'll give her a few moments.
Hello?
Now we can hear you, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Sorry about that. Again, I said, internet problems, Malaysia. So, okay, Jonathan, thanks for sharing the link in the chat so you can open it and check it out. If you like, I encourage you to because it's pretty cool. Like the website looks great. Even I'm like, whoa. So anyway, so this is particular paper.
Natasha, you're stuck again.
I think it's best if Natasha offs her video. I think that will help.
Yeah. Alamak. Oh, okay. We'll wait for Natasha to join us. I
I think she's logging back in.
Okay, I'm back. I think I'm back. Can you all hear me?
Okay, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so sorry everyone. Okay, so this paper, right? This is very comprehensive overview of the management of race relations, and religious grievances in Malaysia. So in this overview, looking at government efforts and also non-governmental efforts to address issues of race and religion in Malaysia. One of the things that, of course, was very obvious is that we have a lot of these campaigns, right? Vision 2020, Bangsa Malaysia, and ways, and very difficult actually to think about practical means of addressing these grievances. And they appear, I quote, they appear have been aimed at, quote, inventing cultural commonality in order to attain common political loyalty. So as such, by promoting cultural unity, they have unfailingly drawn attention to all the issues that engender a lack of practical unity between Malaysians, such as the grievances and the proposed National Harmony Commission could have begun to address. So even the NUCC, National Unity Consultative, I forgot what it's called now, CC something lah. But so there's a lot of these like efforts, right, and try to create concessions for whatever grievances, but clearly like it's been very challenging to go forward with this, particularly when the question of politics is very entrenched. So oh, I forgot, this is not my slide. Helmi, can you go to the next one? Thank you. Okay, so but we are not an organization that is putting forward political we're not putting our own postulations of how politics should be like in this country. But a big part of doing public history is, of course, calling it Imagined Malaysia, so that we can think of different ways of reimagining Malaysian society by looking back into our history. So we are currently in the midst of developing a new project called hashtag tanpa. Okay. Tanpa Perkauman is an online campaign grounded in shared understanding and collective change. So this is a rather particular term, but I'll explain a little bit right now. And the idea is actually to kind of contribute and advocate for very is to come from multiple approaches. We should talk about how people themselves can be agents of this.
Okay, I think Natusha is having some troubles with her internet.
Yeah, give her a moment. I think about 1 or 2 seconds, she'll be back.
Yeah, we'll give her a few seconds.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Natusha.
Oh, why is this happening?
It's okay, it's okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Okay, I'm actually outside my house right now because the signal is better. But let's see. Okay, so you can hear me, but okay, yeah, sure. I think we shouldn't have more interruptions now. Okay, so anti-racism, right? The thing is, we can introduce policies and things like that, but a lot of policy requires a lot of action and, of course, people's own volition to address certain issues. So we want to talk about public history from an anti-racist perspective in the sense that we are providing, as which goes to my next point, resources that are accessible, collated, and a targeted body of educational resources on countering issues of race and discrimination. And we are going to do this by looking back into our own history. Then by doing so and introducing narratives of inclusion, diversity, and of course an appeal to being to appreciating that diversity, we want to contribute and advocate for reconciliation in that sense that bridging differences or ideas or visions of differences, and that includes stereotypes or the use of racial slurs and any other maybe like microaggression or discriminative practices. Next slide. Okay, so right now the project's pretty small scale, but what we are doing is we are developing 60 infographics in the span of 6 months. We'll be conducting a literature review of all the about things about the history of race and racial discrimination in Malaysia. And I don't mean by just like, 1957 onwards, but also before that, early modern history, the Malacca Sultanate, and how race is conceptualized during this time and what we can learn from the past as well, and understand how our ideas of race, racism, discrimination have changed, evolved over time. And through our infographics, we'd also like to reflect and briefly analyze the policy implications on racial dynamics in Malaysia and give a database of further readings so that you can learn more. This will be produced in the form of serials, data infographics, possibly audio snapshots, announcements, social media polls, questions, and most importantly, each infographic ends with a call to action. So yeah, and call to action, I mean by we give people kind of suggestions and tools about how to talk about these topics or use the materials to share with their family and friends if they feel like they come into a situation where they realize a stereotype or racial slur or maybe a certain act of discrimination took place before their eyes. Next slide. Okay, so right now where we are at is phase 1, a historical overview of the beginnings and growth of racism and racial discrimination in Malaysia, and the creation of a social media campaign, therefore the hashtag tanpa perkauman. There's also another hashtag which I forgot to put on the slide, which is kita bukan kami, which the fourth is also a part of this campaign. And we want to showcase all our research findings and combine them with calls to action. But in phase 2, which we are currently in the phase of planning and to pitch, is that we want to focus on reviewing the current provisions regarding the management of race relations. We would like to engage with the relevant stakeholders. So it's not just government, but also people who work in the non-profit sector, the private sector, and ordinary people are stakeholders, because yeah, we've all got skin in this game, right? And it's a very important issue that we need to think about. Okay, yeah, I'm wrapping up soon. Yeah, all these delays and stuff with the lagging, so I'm gonna end soon. But okay, so in phase 2, we'd like to actually develop another microsite, but this time with lesson plans, suggested activities, and oral interviews and videos, similar to the one you saw with the student activism website. But now we would like to work on developing educational resources that can be used in schools, and even in workplaces for that matter, so that we can develop anti-racist education and training. So similar, like akin to gender sensitivity training, but we also think that in Malaysia, we should have the resources for anti-racist training as well to prevent discriminative practices in the workplace or in schools. Next slide. Okay, and just to wrap up, so this great book of which was foundational to developing this campaign by Ibram X. Kendi. It's called How to Be an Anti-Racist. It's quite easy to find online for free, so I totally recommend people to read it. And I quote him here to end: "The only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it and then dismantle it. The attempt to turn this usefully descriptive term into an almost unusable slur is of course designed to do the opposite, to freeze us into inaction."
I think Natusha is frozen. Natusha, are you there?
Sorry, just like, I don't know why the internet keeps dropping. Okay, sorry. So, okay, yeah, just to conclude, what I was going to say is that public history and doing the work of history in public, using historically informed approaches helps us think about issues and deconstruct and disrupt and dismantle. And we hope that we'll continue to be able to do this through our Tanpa Perkauman project and of course student activism. And in the last slide, our email is there. So we're looking for collaborators. We want to make this is a public interest project, and of course we want the public to be involved. So if you have any suggestions, recommendations about how a project, like especially a microsite of educational resources should look like, how it should be implemented, we're very open to suggestions. So that's our email, tanpaperkauman@imagine.my. But for now, you can stay tuned to around May, we'll start publishing our infographics. So that should be fun. And that's all from me. Thank you.
I can't hear Iman.
Yeah, Iman, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. As much as I'm young, the internet, right? So thank you so much, Natusha, for the great presentation. She talked about student activism and how Imagine Malaysia has done primary research, and how turning points in history has, more than often enough have like pushed students to speak out in terms of any racial issues or anything political even. And that's really important to have students to speak out and be involved. And the Tanpa Perkauman online campaign, it speaks about anti-racist training and how we should, as described by Natusha, identify, describe, and dismantle any racial issues or slurs or anything. And how historical perspective is really important when you want to talk about racial issues and race identities, because this whole issue goes way back. This has been something that has been pre-colonial, the pre-colonial era, and how it's been brought forward even up till now. So thank you so much, Natusha. So before we move on, I'll just like to say that we will have Nelson present at the very end. After Ame, we'll have Ame present first. So Ame runs Buku Fiksi, which has published over 200 books in Malay and English since 2011. And its best-selling title is Asrama, 60,000 copies, which is set in Sabah. I don't know about everyone else, but when I was in high school, I'm currently 23, but when I was in high school, we used to exchange a lot of buku fiksi, and we talked about buku fiksi a lot because I think 2011, it was exactly when I started high school. And buku fiksi, was a big part of my growing up, as we can say. Ami also runs Kuman Pictures, whose first 3 films were in 3 different languages. Impressive. So Two Sisters is in Mandarin, Roh is in Malay, and Irol, Ghost Hotel, is in Tamil. So we shall have Ami take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Iman. My current identity is what the Indonesians would call gaptek, which means gagap technology, which is why I'm not using any slides. I have a fear of them. And thank you for telling me about buku fiksi. An anecdote, what makes me most proud of when it comes to buku fiksi is that various students and teachers have told me that it's often the most confiscated items in school hostels. So that makes me very proud. I feel like I've accomplished something. So I would like to talk about 5 separate projects that we have done, meaning my companies, Fiksi as a publishing company and Kuman Pictures as film, where we try to seek out stories from other people. So instead of us going out and saying we want to be diverse, we actually encourage other people to do stories on their own platforms or on our platform, and we share it. Because one of the nicest sayings I know, it was told to me by Yasmin Ahmad. She said it's by a Spanish writer. I don't know if that's true, but she said that the saying is, what is a nation if not the stories it tells itself? So I thought that was very profound. So I would like to highlight 5 projects that we have done. So I will share the links in the chat in all the so that everybody can see what I'm talking about. So the first is during the first MCO around March last year, I suddenly realized that everybody is stuck at home with nothing better to do. So we thought that it would be nice to have a short film contest where people make films in the confines and limitations of their own homes. And remember, the first MCO was very strict. Like, a lot of people just stayed at home. They didn't leave. And including student dormitories, they just left. They just stayed there. So compared to this year where it's much more loose. So it seemed like kind of an odd idea because you can't get friends or crew together with you. And that's how, am I okay? Okay, right. So we thought we would get maybe like 50 entries, but we were surprised when we had over 200 entries. So I'll give you the link here. The project is called Kuman Pictures Challenge, where people were given 2 or 3 weeks to submit a short film in the horror genre, horror or thriller genre. Most choose horror. And what's wonderful when you see all these 200 plus short films is that you get to see people's houses. So, which is quite kind of unusual, because normally when you see a house in a short film, it has been somewhat directed, right? It's been art directed to a certain extent. You choose a certain type of house, but these are, a lot of them were made purely by individuals. It's just one person with a handphone, one man or one woman with a handphone. And so you get access into what their flat or apartment or dorm or house looks like. And what also surprised me is that 1/3, I think, of the entries we got that were in Malay in particular were from Sabah and Sarawak. You can kind of tell by their accents, even though they didn't sort of state it, but from the accents, you kind of know, oh, this is Sabah or Sarawak, which is quite surprising to me because in our normal audio-visual cinematic landscape, Sabah and Sarawak are almost absent in the commercial film industry. So to have this quite a big number from people voluntarily making with their own families from Sabah and Sarawak was quite an eye-opener for me. And we get an insight into what people are afraid of, because obviously it's about, the theme is horror. So we had a lot of hantus, yes, we had a lot of killers, and very few actually touched actively on politics. Even though it wasn't a taboo, you could talk about politics, because obviously talking about COVID, and this was right after the Sheraton move. So I thought there would be more people who would be more explicit about politics, but very few were. Most of it was quite domestic. And one of the few that were about politics, I can't remember the title, but it's in there in the list, where someone says that, oh, the roads are empty. That's because it's 2020. All the roads are flying. All the cars are flying in the sky. So it's a reference to, of course, Wawasan 2020. So if you have time, check out all these 200 plus short films made by ordinary Malaysians who don't think of themselves as filmmakers at all. And the winner was in Tamil. It's called Virus Mairus. And Mairu is a play on a rather rude Tamil word. But here it's meant to be like, it rhymes with virus. And so that's Kuman Pictures Challenge. And the second project is called KL Noir Magic, which is a anthology that we did this year. Here's the link. It is actually the 5th part of an anthology that we started, where we encourage people to write short stories in English with the theme KL Noir. What we have found was that most people's understanding of noir was kind of based on violent revenge fantasies. And this is where you get an interesting sort of, I would say, class perspective, because a lot of it is about the underclass or people who are somewhat marginalized in some way, taking revenge on oppressors. So you have rich people getting killed, for example, rapists getting killed, which is quite a common trope. So this one is the latest, where the editor chose to go on a different route. We give the editors full control. And he said he didn't want something so violent. He wanted something more somber, more contemplative. So this is now out. So this is also, we had over 200 entries, which was kind of a record. And the editor chose 20. And it's about how people perceive, because noir is about, I guess, flirting with the dark side. So it's about how people perceive criminality, or what are the borders that separate kind of a law-abiding person with a lawless person, you know, how easy it is to cross that. So that's also interesting. And it's also an attempt to get people to write creatively in English, because it's kind of a minority pursuit. You might even say elitist pursuit, even though elitist, as you know, you can unpack that, to use that trendy word, because what I found is that because we publish in both Malay and English, English is maybe 10% of our output, but I will continue doing it because in English you get a wider range of ethnicities. That, of course, that's not the only identity, but whereas in our Malay books, it tends to be, you know, very Malay writers, the way it's been set out to be. Gradually, it is changing. There are more non-Malays writing, but it's still kind of a dominant thing. Whereas English, it's neutral in terms of race, but maybe not neutral in terms of class and education. And as you can see from any Malaysia Kini comment section. So the third project is what we did under our non-fiction label. It's called the Tudong Anthology. I can't remember what specific incident sparked it, but I thought it'd be interesting to have an anthology where women talk about tudong, whether they wear it, whether they don't wear it, whether they hate it, whether they love it. So it was an anthology open only to women, because I think for a subject like this, or for any subject really, it's better to have input from the people who are directly affected, including non-Muslim women, because there are some anecdotes about, you know, how they would get certain things said to them for being a non-Muslim woman. And what I remember from this is that there were some men who were very insistent on being in the anthology. So I don't know why. So we got emails by saying, me and my brothers in a university campus, I won't mention which university, but yeah, me and my brothers have a lot to say on this topic. But I said, no, it's not for you and your brothers, it's for the sisters to say what they want. Unfortunately, the book is no longer in print because of a legal issue that I can't get into. But it was such an interesting thing because I read all the ones selected, and I think literally for the first time I realized that when you are a woman, you are very conscious of how people look at you, or rather you are very conscious of being looked at, which I don't think I realized in that such a stark way. When you read all these 20 essays, they were all based on this, you know, the moment I stepped out of the house, I could feel people looking at me, people judging me, or people, which I don't think I've ever experienced myself, being non-female. So it was very interesting at the very least for that. The fourth project was every Wednesday on our Twitter account. We have over 100,000 followers on Twitter, but Twitter refuses to verify us, the bastards. So, but it is the official account. So every Wednesday we have kind of a contest where people DM entries and they will win. So last week, for fun, we did a contest on who can write a short story, very short story, like 100 words or whatever. Not short story, sorry, a synopsis. Who can write a synopsis for a novel that doesn't exist called Derhaka? Because of course the word Derhaka was the word of the day last week because of what the Permaisuri Agong said on her Instagram. So we encourage people to write these synopses. So here are the results. And we also had dozens of entries. Did that go through? Oh, it didn't go through. Yeah, so that one also we had dozens of entries. Some were, you know, more blatantly anti-authoritarian than others. Some choose to do it in a more subtle way. Not all were you know, full on. So we chose 3 winners based on, you know, the fact that if these books if these non-existent books existed, we would want to buy them based on these synopses. So I think that's interesting thing, and it's an interesting thing to do. You take an existing meme, and instead of just getting people to react angrily to it, you create something out of it, and you put something else into this discussion or whatever, even in a small way. So that was the 4th one. The 5th one is a project that doesn't exist yet, but I've been thinking about it, and I will share a link. It's based on a short film I saw years ago. I can't remember where. It's some Asian country where this filmmaker would approach people on the street, and he would ask them to say one phrase in whatever language of whichever city he was in. This is a multi-city project. So, and the phrase is, "I will die." And what's amazing about this project is that it sounds so simple. It sounds so like dumb. It's like you're watching dozens of people saying, "I will die." What is the big deal? But what you get is that the camera would hold on the person for a few seconds after they say that. And you see the difference, because some of them will say in a very flippant way, "Oh, I will die," and it will stay flippant like that. Whereas some actually end up looking very somber and very sad and very contemplative. And it's very different types of people, obviously. So even without foregrounding things like race or class or whatever, you can see they are different. But they all literally have this one thing in common: I will die. So I thought that was very beautiful and profound, and brings us back to, I suppose, the ultimate rule, the ultimate guide in any human society, which is the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated, because you will die and they will also die. So a lot of suggestions for change are about other people changing, very few are about you yourself changing. So I thought that was great. So that's it, our 5 projects that I want to talk about. Thank you. I think Iman is on mute.
Yes, thank you so much, Ame. That was really interesting. I love the Kialnoa anthology. I feel that ever since its first version of the book, you know, it has come up with really, really interesting and great stories. And I'm interested to read the 5th one, since you say that it's a bit more somber, it's more contemplative, and it basically talks about, it's basically talking about how criminality is perceived, but in a more, how do I say contemplative? Contemplative lah, right? But yeah, and I'm also impressed at Buku Fiksi because, you know, as you said, you actually go out and you listen to different voices, which is really, really important. Sometimes we talk about listening to different voices, but we don't really do that. And I think Buku Fiksi has done an incredible job at that. And I'm also interested to read about the Tudung anthology because, you know, Tudung and hijab is an issue that has been ongoing since forever. And even in today's community, the Tudung and the hijab is always, there's always a negative connotation to it when you talk about it. It's always a taboo topic, you know, whether you don a hijab or whether you don't don a hijab. But yeah, for everyone else, please read Buku Fiksi's publications. But yeah, thank you so much, Ame. So now we will have Nelson give his presentation. So Nelson Dino, he is a cultural researcher and author writer. He is a poet and a social activist. Nelson was raised in Sandakan, Sabah, and he uses his love for the literary arts, particularly poetry, short stories, and novels, to promote social changes. He has also written extensively about the Suluk visual arts and culture, and his master's thesis, which is an iconological study of various motifs found on the ukil, the Suluk art of carving, is now being turned into a book and will be published soon. He is also a recipient of the Sabah Literary Prize in 2018, and he has 2 novels that are published by the Institute of Language and Literature Malaysia, DPP, which is Janika or Janika published in 2020, and Sapi Mandangan and Aput Daguan, I hope I pronounced that right, in 2018. So his 3 books of poetry were also published in Jakarta, Indonesia in 2017 and 2018, respectively. I'm excited to hear what Nelson has to share with us today. So Nelson, the floor is yours.
Hello, assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Iman. Can you hear me? Is my voice clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity that the ideas give. Being someone far away from the peninsula, and then across the huge controversial sea of the world, you know, I'm living in front, facing the another sea of our country, which is the Sulu Sea. So I basically living in Sandakan, exactly at the bay of Sandakan. Now I just would like to share something about the Malaysian the cultural identity marker that I learned from my childhood, that I never had that I never had anything against of different ethnicities. And the thing that became my curiosity in my childhood, like about 3 to 4 years old, like that. In our home, in the house, we speak different language. We speak the Suluk language that we have. Upon going outside, we speak the Malay language. So it ignited my curiosity of what is this, you know, because you become curious of how would you deal with your identity by looking at just the language. Now, in this experience that I have in my childhood, I wasn't aware of what is this called racism and everything. So along the way of my journey in life, like studying culture, studying and everything like that, the thing that ignites my interest is the language first. So now we group ourselves, the individuals right now, the individual activists in Sabah, from different ethnicity too. We form a collective called Sari. You know, Sari is just a newborn, just a collective. It's not even like structured yet, because it comes from the ideas how we could bridge the different ethnics of Sabah and in the whole Malaysia. Because why? It is a sort of hypocrisy. We always always portray that, oh, Sabah is the model of being Malaysia, because we can sit in the same table to each other. But there are some kutu-kutu racism that we found out along the way. So we need to like put this outside, you know, we have to embrace that this kutu-kutu exists, you know. So that's why we form this Sari. Sari is a Sabah Reform Initiative. But the Sari, as we understood in Malay, it's the inti, you know, the main content, of something, or an important part, or even the foundation of something. Or if you want also to link it into the women's dress, the Indian women's dress, the sari, that could be because physically the dress could, you know, tie you, membungkus kau, something like that. And so we look at the characteristic of sari like that. So putting everyone into a whole, because every ethnicity or everyone is part of the whole, you know. So in that basic notion, a basic principle of that, we as a citizen, as a person living in the known Malaysia as a country right now, of course we already understood the philosophy and the principle of exists in Rukun Negara, you know. So it's in there. It's an engraved identity that we have. Of course, the Sabah Tanah Air ko, so it's been there. And I'm interested really to deal with language, because I started my as I've shared earlier, that my curiosity started from the language, because basically in the house we speak our bahasa ibunda, and then outside it's Malay. And of course, when you are in the school, you learn English. So basically, I learn things from different words of different ethnicity because I love learning words. Because for me, words contain culture of different ethnicity. I'm not looking just in the words, in my experience, looking into in my journey in arts, is looking at the meaning of the word, the etymology, then the social context of the word. So that's how I learned it. So when we go to our national language, which is the Bahasa Malaysia, it's a composition of different languages of the world. You know, the language itself is a cultural marker of our identity being in a larger context as Malaysian or bangsa Malaysia. Another thing connected to this language is the gesture, the gesture that our moyang, our ancestor of every different ethnicity that we have in Malaysia, we have these oral traditions. You know, before the coming of writing or even the written literature, our ancestors been doing oral traditions. They are transferring stories and stories and stories. Even the hikayat, hang tua, and everything that started from the oral tradition. So another thing that I love being in an identity is the whole context of bangsa Malaysia is that the wood carving. You know, the motive of the wood carving. Can I still be heard? I mean, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, the importance of oral traditions and the motives of the carvings. That's why I studied carving so that I could understand the philosophy, the aesthetic meanings behind the motives that our ancestors carve, you know. And in the oral history too, I mean the oral tradition, we can also learn many things in there, but looking at just the one word that we see there, we can see something that deeper and deeper as the values, you know. We understand that Malaysia is a multitude of influences from different cultures, but I'm looking into the common values, you know, the common values of being part of different ethnicity. If we connect it into the religious scriptures, the values of being different is been there, you know. It's engraved in that the common values that you have. Of course, we have the national principle in philosophy, and then as I have mentioned, that language is the strong ingredient of our existence. You know, it's an ingredient of it as the existence, you know, our existence as human in this land. It is, I said, it's an engraved and innate Malaysian culture. Like 2 days ago, we talked also about advocacy seni dan budaya, and we were asked if the seni and budaya is separated. So I said no, it's not even separated. It cannot be. It's like ombak. It's like ombak dan arus di lautan. You know, because why? The being artists of our ancestors for being artists, it's their budaya, it's their culture. You know, so the culture also is the content of the arts. That's what we do, no? And until today, also we try to learn from that oral tradition that we have. And we know that our existence is a symbiosis of different elements of what we call tanah air, you know, because when we look at the concept of tanah air, you cannot explain it in one word like the English translation as homeland. The concept of being tanah air is so different. That's why it exists only the soul of it, only that us who understood Malay language about the meaning of tanah air. You know, tanah, so meaning it's the mix of the elements of tanah, the land, and the air, because our country is a maritime country, and then it has also its own bukit and everything like that. So we exist, and if we connect into the oral tradition that I said earlier, we exist from that. You know, even the religious things, kita menjadi tanah pun dari sorob dari air, kan? So it's really a deeper concept that the values that we have in our ancestors, you know. That's why part of those advocacies that we have, this Sari thing, even part of my personal thing that I do, aside from writing stories in novels like that, we usually conduct poetry reading, you know, poetry reading in different languages. We call it Aku Tanah Air. Yeah, Aku Tanah Air. And then recently, we have these pillars of Sabah, which became an issue, and media issue also, because it was erased without notice. The Pillars of Sabah is in Kota Kinabalu. It's a community project. It's a community project art project curated by Jared Abdurrahman, and 31 pillars is composed of different values of each community around Sabah. So my pillar was a passion values that I was given, but unfortunately, even before 4 months, it's been erased. So let us in our campaign, let us use that concept, the called Aku Tanah Air, meaning I am myself is this country. You know, it's if I say I am myself is this country, so I am myself is you, and you are yourself is me, you know. So that is we use the hashtag Aku Tanah Air. And then one of the purposes of Sari also, it's a bridging different cultures. It's in a narratives of contracts of the called small group, the heroes yang tidak didindang, you know, as something sort of that. I don't like to use the word minority, because for me there's no such minority in terms of culture, you know. So we need to hear the voice of those community on the ground, not the elitist narrative or construct. So along the journey of our art business, you know, art journey, we also call this anti-ignorance. You know, it's an anti-ignorance. We don't want to use basically the anti-racism, not because it is not good or something that it is clear against it. We are all against it, but it has a deeper factor on that. So we call it anti-ignorance, no? Anti-ignorance, anti-dungu, or we use sometimes the hashtag membungkus kedunguan, you know? Bungkuslah kedunguanmu. So sort of that, membungkus kedunguan. So anti-dungu lah. So it's an anti-ignorance, anti-dungu. So that's what we are like in doing right now, aside from writing our own novels in the Malaysian story that we have. So yeah, basically that's the story, the Malaysian story that I could tell you from across the Sandakan Bay to Peninsula Malaysia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nelson. That was really interesting about Sari as well. I'm interested to know what more that Sari has done. And yeah, you're completely correct. You know, in the Rukun Negara, it promotes inclusivity and it's like embedded in the Rukun Negara. But I think it's something that a lot of us overlook. It's not something that a lot of us practice. And language being a cultural marker, it is a part of my identity. Like for myself, I can only speak either English ataupun bahasa. So it's only 2 languages that I can communicate with people. And that tells us a lot about our identity, you know, because in Malaysia, it's a melting pot. We have a lot of ethnicities, a lot of races. So while we argue about our differences and, you know, our issues, it's also important to take note of like what values do we have in common. And I think you spoke about that beautifully. Thank you so much. And yeah, anti-dungu, membungkus kedunguan, that is also a great campaign because ignorance is really something that causes a lot of tension between us because, you know, people fail to understand what we're trying to communicate and the message doesn't get across. But yes, thank you so much, Nelson. So now we'll move on to the Q&A session. So there are a few questions here from the audience. Okay, so the first question, this is I'm gonna combine these 2 questions together because it basically talks about the same thing. So someone asked, what are your thoughts about slacktivism? Is it enough for the general public to share about social media posts and articles that we read online? Or if not, how else can we contribute? And then Daniel also asked, like, what initiatives, this is specifically for Natusha also, what initiatives can be done to ensure that youths from schools are exposed to racial dynamics and also appreciate history, because our current education system is not very effective. So yeah, anyone from the panel, maybe we can start with Natusha since this question is for you, but also about the selectivism, whether for the general public, is it enough for us to just reshare posts online instead of you know, actively going out and doing something?
Thank you for the questions. I think they're really important. Let me just like answer the selectivism one first. Okay, so the thing is like, yeah, you can see there's this proliferation of infographics and a lot of them are actually predominantly in English, right? And this is why, like, actually one of the ways that informed this Tanpa Perkauman campaign and how we want to design our infographics when we were discussing with ideas about this, right? Because you notice it's like the orientation of a lot of these like infographics and why they're associated with slacktivism is because they don't end with a call to action. And a lot of the ways they address very polemical, very current issues, it's very hard line, right? You have like only one perspective being given there, and then it's condemning and kind of isolating people who may be, whether they're apologetic to those perspectives or they feel like, or they've been conditioned by those perspectives. So it's rather, at times it can appear very judgmental. And then, okay, then you see these infographics are English, they're on Instagram, then you read it, you're like, all right, that's cool. Then you share it on your Instagram story or your Facebook story, and then it just dies out. So that's one of the things about this information, right? And why then it gets associated with selectivism, because the lack of call to action. So what we are trying to do with Tanpa Perkauman is that, one, all the material is bilingual. We write them in Malay and in English, and each one of it ends with a call to action, in the sense that we ask and we appeal to people to think about it. We try to provide two perspectives or more to the same issue. So for example, like we have like one about discrimination. What is discrimination? And what are the different ways, and how many different people experience discrimination differently? And a lot of times, I think that's the issue, right? It's like you need to have some empathy in this infographics, and I think that's what is lacking. And then of course, like how to go beyond, right? So this connects to the second question about initiatives and whatnot. So currently, maybe some of you might have heard of this organization, or you've not. There's something called Architects of Diversity. They are not, I wish they were a lot more famous, but I hope that you check it out, because they have this really amazing campaign called Sekolah Semua. They've gotten secondary school students involved, and to amplify their voices and experiences of racial discrimination in school. So it's very important to document and to validate what children feel and what they experience in school, right? And that is the first step, validation. And then of course, like that's why like there is a need to go beyond that validation as well. So you generate empathetic conversations where you validate experiences of others that you don't necessarily identify with. And that comes with like learning more about people. Then of course, it's like also making a pledge to like wanting to unlearn and learn new things, right? Unlearn what is like problematic or like conditioned into you or can generate harm, right? So it's not like, so that's why it shouldn't just be like infographics or whatnot, but what can you do with that information, right? Is it enough to share it on your Instagram story? No, right? So what can you do with it? That's why we want to develop this microsite and, you know, work with collaborators, because like we need to like redesign or reconceptualize a lot of this information so that it seems more usable than just you like giving this lecture to someone saying, you know, you're so problematic, I'm going to cancel you for saying this, saying that. Because like in real life, that's not how it really is. It's easy to do it on Twitter, canceling someone, right? But then you say it's your uncle, your own parents for that matter, or even like your best friend saying things, right? And, you know, like how do we actually create a safe space for a lot of these conversations? How do we create safe space, not just within like our own houses, but also like in schools for children, teachers to, you know, reevaluate the power dynamics, and of course, you know, our positions, our identities, what's sensitive to us, and you know, so these are things that require very difficult conversations and requires a lot of like thinking. So you know, if you're interested, do follow Architects of Diversity, and of course, definitely everyone should be following Ian and the Ford's project Sama Sama, because that is what they're trying to do. So, and this idea is just to replicate, we need to start replicating those kind of healthy conversations, like giving people information and learning to actually deliver information in a way that's non-judgmental, that's inviting a dialogue, rather than telling someone, you are wrong, I am right, this is my way, and this is everybody's way, and you're the one that is a weirdo for not, you know, going on this route. So yeah, like I think that's the best way to move forward. Educational initiatives, definitely one is the output of resources, but having resources that are people-centered and very action-oriented. That's how we are going to move forward. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Natusha. I think you are absolutely correct. I think in the age of new media, you know, as we all call it now, Twitter, Instagram, there is this cancel culture that's super toxic, and I don't think that it is as meaningful, you know, because whenever someone says something wrong or whenever there's a mistake, you know, people online are quick to just say like, oh, let's cancel this person, or let's just, yeah, cancel lah. It's cancel culture, which is toxic because you're not really educating the other person. You're not really educating the person who has made a mistake. And it's really important for us to be empathetic and to like understand why do they have these thoughts in the first place, right? But yeah, Ian, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to agree with you on that note on cancel culture, but also to add to that, I think we have to be very careful because I like the fact that like when we refer to slacktivism, okay, obviously slacktivism comes with a certain connotation that it is bad already, but I do feel that there is a lot of activism that can be done in the digital space that has become more and more effective as we go along. So I remember about 10 years ago, I did a story on what we were calling slacktivism back then, right? About young people who have been just supporting things like Coney 20, whatever. You guys remember that thing? The Coney campaign to make Robert. Is his name Robert Coney? We already forgot already. So when all that was going on, so we did a lot of stories about this, whether this new idea of collectivism is good or bad. And then a lot of experts will say, oh, it's actually bad, it causes fatigue, it gives you a false sense of accomplishment and so on and so forth. But in those 10 years, we've seen how technology has improved, how it has continued to empower young people to an extent where their clicks actually can translate into real change. It can actually create a lot of good out of whether it's through donations, whether it's through sending aid, whether it is, for example, holding people accountable through what has now become cancel culture. So on that note, I feel, I think cancel culture has been used as a term by people who don't want to be held accountable, right? And every time I feel a lot of times when people use digital media in really good ways, in good faith, to try to hold some people accountable for bad behavior, everybody's like, oh, look, it's cancel culture, the mob is coming again. So we have to be very careful, I feel, when we're discussing that, to separate the two. There is one form of, internet activism where you're holding people accountable and calling them out for bad behavior. And of course, there's where you dig up tweets from 20 years ago and say, oh, like this person, we should cancel them once and for all. So yeah, I like Mohan is saying in the chat, consequence culture. Yeah, I think, or accountability culture or whatever. Accountability obviously doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound very sexy, but I do hope that moving forward, we need to move very carefully, because every time somebody does that, every time, for example, period checks come on, come to light, and people, oh, look here, the cancel culture mob is here. They're trying to put this teacher out of a job. No, we're just holding them accountable for their actions. Yeah, so just wanted to add that really quick. Thanks. And Natusha, back to you.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to, I should have mentioned that, but thanks for saying that, we need to be careful. And, it's very easy, to just fall into binaries for a lot of things. And then the thing is I think what should be the main core value in all the activism advocacy is definitely accountability culture. Just being able to hold people accountable. And let's take a more popular example, like J.K. Rowling and her transphobia, right? And she used and invoked this whole cancel culture thing in a way to vindicate herself from the criticism. So these are moments in our contemporary politics where cancel culture then is brought forward. But here you had so many people put themselves out there very vulnerable and try to educate someone about how transphobia is very harmful and things like that. And of course, this rejection of refusing to unlearn and be held accountable for the harm that they have caused is being she's just denying it, right? And that led to what people started talking about this, oh, she's been cancelled. But so when we do this work on anti-racism and things like that, it's it's just basically holding people accountable for the harm they have caused to another person. That's the basic idea of it, and it's really important to generate that safe environment for people and to hold people accountable, right? And as Mohan said, consequence, to be responsible for the consequences. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Natusha, and thank you, Ian. So let's move on to the next question. So this is a question from Mohan. He asked, what are the limits of sensitivity training in the context of a political economy and political party competition that depends on racial and religious mobilization? So this question, maybe Ami or maybe Ami, you can answer, or maybe Natusha.
Oh, I will leave it to Natusha.
Okay.
Oh, you mean this is the question about research, right?
No, it's about sensitivity training.
Where is it? Oh, okay. Mohan's question. Well, thank you for the question. I think, okay, yeah, definitely, I think that's like one of the issues, right? Our economy is very much characterized by race and like this practices of discrimination, and obviously like very big companies would have a huge pushback to sensitivity training, at times, because it might benefit them, right? So like I think like one of the limitations definitely is political will, for sure. Like, because it's very easy to just say like, no, we can just like act on good faith, and rather than actually sit down and like have this like anti-racist workshop where you start reflecting and asking your maybe like your colleagues who are belonging to the ethnic minority in that particular company, telling you that I felt that you were being condescending towards me in this way, and you're kind of like assuming that I'm like this, and I feel it has a lot to do with my ethnicity. And then of course someone's like, I'm not a racist, and this happens a lot when you try to have these difficult conversations. So I think like definitely like it's something we have to do very incrementally, and we have to encourage and talk to, especially particularly the private sector, about how like there is a need to set new norms and agendas and policies, and it makes it much better, a healthier environment for like our workplaces and workplace dynamics, right? And this should be the same thing when we approach schools as well, in terms of doing this kind of sensitivity training. And with this period checks and whatnot, we know it's really dire, people need it, and parents would, and also of course knowing who your stakeholders are, like parents would support this kind of initiatives if they have like they know that their children have been hurt or whatnot, right? So it's the same thing. People need to feel like there's this collective like will and need for it. I can't say I'm an expert because I don't run sensitivity training workshops, but probably like someone who works in women's rights NGOs would have like a lot more to say about how this might be implemented. So yeah.
Thank you, Natusha. Okay, just want to ask, is everyone okay if we extend it a bit for like 5 to 10 minutes, since we had like some hiccups in between? Yeah, okay, great. So before I move on to the questions, I just want to do a quick round of like this question. So what do our panels, what is your opinion of Bangsa Malaysia? Maybe we can start with Ami and then we can go around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fine in concept. I think the best description of Bangsa Malaysia was by a friend named Yuhang, who said that what does being a Malaysian mean to you? And he said, well, it means that I still have it in me to get angry when our football team fucks up. So I think that's the best description. It's something just so core and so elemental. It doesn't have to be so slogany. Yeah.
Nelson?
Yeah, basically for me, it's just an innate nature of us. We do exist, but Bangsa Malaysia itself is an innate nature that we have. We don't need to put istilah or a mazhab, we don't need that. Meaning you just exist and you feel pain if something happens to anyone. Because being Malaysia itself is the entire archipelago. So it's not basically the concept of the nation state that we have right now. Bangsa Malaysia is aku tanah air. That's why that falls into that. Yeah, for me, like that lah.
Thank you, Nelson. Ian?
Yeah, similar to what Nelson said, which is said very well. I think it really is, it's one of many identities that we hold. And it's definitely not something we need to hold on sometimes too strongly to. The whole idea of that there are other identities that we all hold that perhaps will help us to okay, I don't know how to put this without sounding terrible, but in many ways sometimes we just keep this nationalistic pride. It can be harmful as well. So yeah, so whenever I hear like talk about this type of nationalistic identity, I'm always very keen to say, well, there's more to us than just which of these imaginary geographical borders that we were born in. The identity is not just defined by that. And there are so many other identities that we can share with people across borders, who people who come into our borders, refugees, migrant workers. There's so much shared identity that we still have, that if we keep clinging on to this too hard or too strongly, it stops us from experiencing those shared identities and everything, all the great stuff that comes with it. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, yeah.
It does. And yeah, okay, Natusha?
Actually, I'm like gonna agree with Ian, and that's also kind of like how I see the concept of Bangsa Malaysia. And let's just kind of break it down to, right? Okay, see, Bangsa, what does Bangsa mean? Does someone want to put in the chat? What does Bangsa mean in English? If you could translate it to one word. Is it community? Is it, yeah, okay, see, it's race. And of course, there's this whole like, I mean, there's numerous studies like about what Bangsa means, right? And you can look at, you know, scholars like Shamsul AB and Arifin Omar, who have written very extensively. I mean, Arifin Omar wrote this book called Bangsa Melayu, which is about Malay nationalism, and really important seminal work about this concept or the definition of Bangsa, which comes from like, supposed to imply community, and it's not racially marked, but today is now to denote race. And then Malaysia is the name we gave to this land that is so old and so has this long history, and we decided to slap the name Malaysia post you know, one Sabah and Sarawak join us, right, after the Malaysia agreement. So like so they're very artificial, but also one of the most important features of this is that it's very exclusionary. So race is a very exclusionary concept, right? And if we keep excluding people, how are we ever going to find like some form of stability or peace, right? So and again, as Ian said, right, and the cost of this kind of like view of life, whether it's multiple races or just having one race, is that someone's going to get excluded or get hurt in the process. In this case, migrant workers, refugees, stateless individuals are all experiencing the cost of these categories, right? So there is a need to build and rethink or reimagine our communities, right? That's why it's imagined Malaysia, because, you know, it's an idea, and then how you revisit and rethink that idea of Malaysia. And there is a need to go beyond that and transcend what is very exclusionary and try to be inclusive to everyone, you know, on the basis of humanity. So that's my take on Bangsa Malaysia.
Thanks, Natusha. Okay, so now we have another question from Kot Liang Chu. So This person said, in the early 1990s, I researched into Malaysian race relations for LLM dissertation at a UK university. Not only was there a dearth of materials regarding this both in the UK and in Malaysia, but law professors in the UK and Malaya University warned me that such research in Malaysia could be deemed seditious. Is it safer now to discuss and research regarding race relations in Malaysia? Maybe Amir can give a point of view from a publication point of view. Maybe like, do you get entries that are deemed seditious? And maybe Natusha or anyone else can give a perspective on the academic side.
To me, I'm not the person who decides if something is seditious or not. I will leave that to people whose job it is. Yeah, we do have, I suppose, some level of self-censorship, but I think it's a very case-by-case kind of thing. If something is published, do you want to be associated with that? Because knowing full well that if you want to write about something like race, someone can just screenshot one paragraph and say this paragraph represents anywhere, where it's actually not. Or people judge it based on the title, because just as people don't read newspaper articles, they just read the title. Sometimes people judge just by the title. So there's always that risk. So I think it's always important to push the boundaries, but also for me, because I deal with, a kind of a mass public, I wouldn't publish a book called How to be Anti-Racist, because I think the kind of people who buy it are the people who already subscribe to Aliran Monthly and are very, I'm saying this with a straight face, by the way. So I would rather smuggle in something like that into something else, because the people who pick up a book about anti-racist are the ones who think, oh, I'm already so non-racist, I want to read about all these other nasty racists out there. So that's not a good place to start in, I think.
Yeah, if I could share something about it, I think it's not basically that it's called seditious or whatever. It's just being kena cantas like that, but it's the escapism or denial that the thing exists. Like the word racism itself, it's a sort of like, why do you say that? Is it an implication that racism exists in this country? If you say yes, oh, they deny it. No, I am not. So that's why, as I connect it to the campaign anti-ignorance, so it's actually a tacit campaign of anti-racism. So in terms of writing, what is being censored is, my experience publishing or giving my manuscript, especially to Dewan Bahasa dan Pustaka, it should be murni, the nilai murni of being human or being Malaysian. In your novel, you cannot you cannot put the myth, or even if you wanted to put the community relations, it should be the cultural relationship. It's sort of like that, and you don't need to mention that it is something because of racism I want to put this. It should not explicitly be mentioned, but the values of it is within. So that's why the word anti-ignorance is actually anti-racism. So it's bigger than that. Yeah, that's the thing I can share.
Thank you, Nelson. Okay, so we actually have a question for Ian. Mohan asked, how does empathetic conversation deal with structural asymmetries in power relationships?
Yeah, sorry, I saw that question earlier and I just wrote something down. Let me just check. Right. I think first of all, when we do a campaign to the current campaign that we're doing with ideas, it's really about shifting social norms first, right? That yeah, we do. I understand that there are power structures that make it difficult for you to have empathetic conversations sometimes, but what we are trying to do is to model empathetic conversation, what it should look like. So in this campaign, that's where it starts, where people start to realize, hey, actually, the powers that be, the power structures, the way that they discuss issues, whether it's in the media, whether it's on their social media platforms as influencers, or whether it's even in parliament, the way they've been having these conversations has actually been terrible, right? They're actually just clinging on to identities and just trying to win all the time, trying to make sure that their identity comes out on top. So when we change that culture, when we change that social norm, where conversation is actually meant to be empathetic, I think that takes away a lot of power from those who are actually in power. They suddenly realize that they're the odd ones out. They're the ones they're screaming. They're the ones they're trying to put other people down. They're the ones engaging in hateful rhetoric and so on and so forth. I also think empathetic conversation actually reduces the ability of people in power to pit, us against each other, to pit identities against one another, to pit this race against that race. So that takes a lot of power away from them. That reduces that, for me, that asymmetrical power structure that you're talking about. And lastly, I think empathy is also something that's quite contagious. Especially, I feel as a journalist, whenever we go into an interview, at least for me and my team, we always remind ourselves, we have to come from a place of empathy, right? That means practicing active listening. It's an actual skill. Empathy is not just something that's all airy and fairy and you're just doing it out of the goodness of your heart. No, it's something that you have to practice. There are ways to do it. So we practice things like active listening. We look at body language. We listen to emotion. We try to decipher emotion versus and where the person is coming from emotionally, as well as in terms of what they're saying factually. And once you do that, you always realize that people respond in kind. So I think that also is a way to kind of break down that power structure, that if you are able to empathize with someone in power, whether they're doing good or bad, that can open them up. That allows a dialogue to take place, and hopefully just reduces that power imbalance.
Thanks, Ian. I think it's really important to address that because, of course, empathetic conversations are encouraged, but at the same time, some people find it difficult because of the differences in power structures, right?
Yeah, sorry, if you don't mind me adding, and that's why for us, we were very, very keen to show that you can have an empathetic conversation with just 3 rules. That's it. So if you watch the series, you'll see. So the first rule is just to come from a position of empathy. That means trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and understanding the feelings behind some of the facts that they're saying as well. So going a step deeper. Number 2 is to speak from your personal experience. That means don't say, I heard somebody else told me this, I heard from somebody else. You're speaking from your lived experience. And the third one is to acknowledge your bias. So by just these 3 steps, you can actually have it's a very simple way to start an empathetic conversation. Still needs practice, it's still a skill, but that's what we're hoping to prove, that you can create such conversations without a lot of fuss. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. So someone from Facebook, Lawrence Xiao, said, being educated does not mean that there is moral and ethical maturity. Many times we have seen developed countries behaving like hooligans during a protest. Does anyone has any opinion on this?
Sorry, can you repeat the comment? I was just replying to something in the chat. Sorry.
Being educated does not mean that there is moral and ethical maturity. Many times we have seen developed countries behaving like hooligans during a protest. So somehow, like, education level does not mean that you are morally or ethically mature. Right, okay. So So someone asked, are anti-discriminatory laws or race relation consultative councils necessary in Malaysia? Natusha, maybe you can answer this.
Yeah, actually, like, can I answer also the one on research on race relations very quickly? Yeah, okay, so like, I mean, I can tell you as someone who's like, yeah, I mean, academic, right? And definitely, like, I think in the 1990s, one of the reasons you might not have been able to find a lot of things because most of the files were still closed in the British National Archives. And I'm pretty sure if you go back anytime the next few years, post-COVID when you can fly, or if during COVID you can fly, then good for you. But the Foreign Office and Colonial Office files have opened, and you would find like the full collection, which I heard most of it is also now in Arkib Negara, Malaysia, of the Pan-Malayan intelligence reports. So these are reports like from the years 1941 to 48, and you're going to find a lot of descriptions or documentation about the management of race relations in colonial Malaya before the emergency and during Malayan emergency. And it's very valuable repository of information to understand race relations. But I do realize that not a lot of Malaysian researchers, like, because, you know, it's issues of accessibility, mobility, right, to go and look at these resources. And I mean, I had the opportunity because I did my master's, and although I focused on Patani, a lot of the information came from these files. And as I was going through them, I learned a lot of, yeah, there's a lot of accounts on like managing race relations. So yeah, people tell you it's sensitive and all, but, you know, just like don't pay attention to this because it's all imagined fears as well. And if you're really passionate about this topic and you're invested in it, then you should just go ahead and do it. Nobody's gonna like arrest you. But if you publish a book like Kwak Yasung, you know, and he's made 13 books, it might get banned, but like, you know, it shouldn't stop you from wanting to do the research because nobody can stop you from doing that. What stops you is your fear. And then the question, what was the second question? Ima, can you repeat it? Sorry.
Oh yeah, the second question was, are anti-discriminatory laws or race relation consultative councils necessary in Malaysia?
Actually, yeah, I think that's why, you know, you should totally read this paper by Amrita Malhi because she does do this really fair and very thorough assessment of like the consultative councils, and as well as like mooting for anti-discrimination laws. Personally, I think it is good to have anti-discrimination laws, but it's no point just like having these laws and then you know, people actually not enforcing or believing in the need to eradicate discrimination, right? That's why we came up with Tanpa Perkauman, and that's why there are projects like you know, Sama-Sama, because there's a need for people to feel the need to eradicate discrimination in their everyday lives. And that's more important than having the law, I think. And while we might argue that these kind of efforts would be a lot more effective if there was like a state institution kind of endorsing and supporting these kind of initiatives, it's an open question, you know, and I don't think there's like absolute answers, to be honest, especially given the context of like how politically unstable it has been lately, you know, questions of regime change and like outlooks and ideologies of the ruling government are not necessarily so stable and, you know, rooted in these kind of practices or values, right? So for now, I think, you know, there's more hope in wanting people to collectively work on community building and development through these kind of initiatives. And yeah, this is me sounding very like pessimistic about the state and what the state can do in terms of managing race relations. But yeah, I think that's what I would weigh on, you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Natusha. Okay, so that is the end of our questions. I just wanted to take note of something that our Arkana Devi Mohan Pillai said in the chat box. This person mentioned that the All Women Society Action Society, AWAM, conducted a training for trainees on diversity. So the training module included a section on race. I think it's responsible for us to create spaces for inclusivity and enable equity, continue to educate ourselves without censorship or openness. So, the takeaway from this is there is that importance of creating safe spaces, and I think the fourth has done a really good job at that. Props to the fourth. So, okay, as before we end, I would just like to ask each of our panel to give their last remarks. Maybe give us some sensible messages that could be projected within the public sphere to overcome discrimination and racially biased sentiments. We can start with Ian, and then we can move on to Natusha, Amir, and Nelson.
Ian, it's your turn.
Oh, me first. Sorry, my bad. Closing thoughts. I just like to end by saying empathy is putting yourselves in someone else's shoes, right? Seeing, that means experiencing their identity, experiencing who they are, if only for a split second. And so what better way to really shape our identity as a community, as a society, than to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and to experience the multitude of their identities, and to do that on a daily basis. It's exciting. It is beautiful. It is a wonderful experience when you get used to that, right? To not see it as just me protecting my identity, but me getting to experience somebody else's identity every single day by taking a walk in their shoes, by trying to see where they're coming from. So yeah, if we have any hope of coming up with a positive version of what Bangsa Malaysia should be, what that national identity should be, I think it needs to start from that place of empathy. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Nelson. Natusha?
Okay, well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Ideas, for inviting me. Want to be a part of this collective of really amazing projects to think about race and racial discrimination in Malaysia. But also I think one of the things that we should definitely think about is having empathy, but also just this willingness and openness to unpack what these moments of identity and maybe the exclusion of identity, to unpack these moments and think about it so critically and how we could overcome the things that hurt us collectively as society. We have to think more like if it hurts that person, it hurts me too, and it hurts everybody. And a big part of inspiration we can draw from is definitely unpacking our past, our histories of how this nation was formed and how people came together, right, to form what we are so entrenched into, which is Bangsa Malaysia. So keep being open and empathetic. That's really the key, and resonate with people and their experiences of life as a Malaysian and as a non-Malaysian in this country. So that's all I've got to say. Yeah.
Thanks, Natusha. Amir?
I would like to share a short practical anecdote about how discrimination was overcome. And this is a discrimination that had been entrenched for decades in a company. I won't mention the company, but it's a public listed kind of a GLC kind of thing. And when I worked there, which is kind of giving away what company it is, in our initial batch of people who came in, we were like the, what do you call it when you're not confirmed yet? There's a term for it. Oh, I'm out of conventional.
Probation.
Probation. Yeah, oh my God. I haven't worked in an office for decades. But so among the probation batch, the women in that batch, and these are talking about people in their early 20s, succeeded in a revolution because one woman pointed out that, wait a minute, how come Friday all men get 2 hours lunch break even if they're non-Muslim, but all women only get 1 hour lunch break. Doesn't this mean we are being discriminated in terms of pay? Because we're getting paid the same. So we're working 1 hour more than men per week for the same pay. So they initiated this thing, which kind of snowballed. And I don't know how much longer later, less than a year later, the policy was changed. Everybody had 2 hours off. It's a very small thing, and maybe it sounds very self-serving because people want 1 hour. But I think it comes to a basic point of sometimes it takes a few determined people to point out that, oh, this is unfair, and push until something happens. Yeah, so that's a very short, true anecdote from the 1990s.
Thanks, Amir, for the anecdote. Okay, so Nelson, the floor is yours.
Hi, here again. Now, my only sharing is to end this beautiful, good sharing. Having an equal standing to be Malaysian is not about the height, but it's about values and needs of each piece of the nation. That's this equal standing. And I would also like to emphasize that Sabah in Sarawak did not join Malaysia. Sabah in Sarawak joined to establish Malaysia, okay, as a country. They did not join that Malaysia is there and we joined you. No. They berkumpul and establish Malaysia. So that's, it should be put in a context. And then another thing is the word anti-discrimination. If we are going to put that into like part of that advocacy, we should look into the context of the local perspectives, because the word itself does not exist the way we understood. Even in a Malay language, there's no such kind of discrimination. It is, you know, the English is malinized, you know, it's discriminasi. So what I'm trying to have it, it's what is it in a local context of every part of the community. What's that? You know, what's that even means? So if, like, for example, that someone or an agency wanted to create an anti-discrimination law, it should be understood by every person in the grassroots, so that they understood what's this, because it does not exist in our vocabulary, you know, that one. And another thing that I would like to emphasize also in here, that Malaysian identity is not a tri-people identity, not a tri-people as commonly perceived, you know. Yeah, I know you understand, you understood when I say a tri-people, you know. It is beyond that, you know. It is a multiple people, but we don't need to mention, you know, we don't need to mention that this kaum, because you cannot even say that, because it's hundreds of them. Just in Sabah alone, 30 main ethnicities, and there are sub-ethnics, hundreds of them. So you cannot put the country in just a 5 ethnicities. No, you cannot. Oh yeah, that is why please, you know, like, don't always think of that when you are in Malaysia, you just live in your room. That's why one of the things that Sari is bringing out is, if you are from the Pantai Timur, Sabah Pantai Timur, you should also understand the Sabah Pantai Barat, because what happens is you understood the history or the culture of Sabah according to what do you do, what are you, you know, it's not that. No. So another thing is yeah, I said it's a beyond boundaries. Now I'm urging everyone, myself, marilah kita sama-sama membantu membungkus kedunguan itu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nelson. I really like your point. I think you're right. Sometimes when we talk about unity, and sometimes when we talk about being, you know, that togetherness, we somehow diminish, or we make our cultures less apparent, and that's not what we want to do. You know, the whole point of this webinar is to talk about how we can bridge race relations, the gap in race relations, but also at the same time enhance our own cultures and like embrace our own cultures in Malaysia, because we live in a multi-ethnic country, right? So thank you so much to our panelists. Today we did talk about race relations, we talked about bridging the gap between ethnicities, and our panelists shared their stories, their work, and you know, their successful stories, their unsuccessful stories. And we are so glad and grateful to have everyone with us today. Just to reiterate, this webinar is part of a larger project in ideas. So this project is a project on national unity and interracial harmony. Thank you to the EU for funding us, and we hope that we can have more of this conversations in the future. So stay tuned for more webinars and more projects coming from us. So thank you so much, everyone. And please feel free to leave comments and or email any of our panelists if you wish to have further engagement regarding this topic. So thank you, and have a great Tuesday, everyone.